Now, just before we get started with today's video, I want to thank you guys so much for all of your support. You guys are amazing, and I'm very grateful to have you in my life. So, thanks again. With that being said, let's begin today's video. So, there have been many people over the years who have claimed that they have experienced time slips. And if you don't know what time slip is, this is when a person suddenly finds themselves losing track of time. And while doing this, they could be engaged in something very mundane or ordinary, like washing the dishes or making coffee. Suddenly, they look at the clock and realize that an hour or even several hours have passed since they had last looked at the clock, and yet it feels like no time has passed at all. Other people have also claimed that they have experienced something known as lost time, which is a phenomenon that has been observed in people suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's disease. In these cases, a person can suddenly find themselves unable to remember anything about the previous hour or even minutes of their lives. When asked how they've been or what they've been up to, their response would typically be, "I don't know." Now, obviously, the first explanation that comes to mind is that they're just making all of this up. But researchers have estimated that nearly 1/3 of all dementia patients experience this phenomenon. So what exactly is going on here? Well, in order to answer that question, we first need to take a look at what time actually is. If you were to ask 100 random people on the street what time is, you'd probably get 100 different answers. However, one of the most common answers would probably be that time is simply the fourth dimension. This idea was first introduced by Albert Einstein, who told us that space and time intertwined together form a sort of fabric known as space-time. However, there is a problem with this definition, and the problem is consciousness. In order to understand what I mean by this, let's imagine that I'm a man who has fallen into a deep slumber. Now, according to Einstein's theory, time would still be passing while I'm sleeping, right? Even though I'm unconscious, time is still passing. That means that I'm missing out on some amount of time, which leads us to the conclusion that time is not a physical thing that exists in and of itself. Instead, it's a construct of our minds that we use to quantify change. This concept was further expanded upon by the German philosopher Martin Heidegger, who argued that time is nothing more than a way of organizing events. He referred to time as the structure of our life world, meaning that time is a part of the world that we inhabit, and therefore, it cannot exist independently of our perception. Essentially, he argued that time is what allows us to distinguish between past, present, and future. Without time, all events would occur at once, and therefore, we would not be able to perceive them as a sequence of events. Now, another philosopher by the name of Augustine also argued that time only exists in relation to human consciousness. He argued that time is a part of our psychological makeup, and without consciousness, there would be no such thing as time. But even Augustine had a hard time wrapping his head around the concept of time. In his book, Confessions, he famously wrote, "What then is time? If I say that it is passing, I am including the future with the present. If I say that it is past, I include the future with the past. But if I say that it is both past and future, I seem to say nothing at all." When we think about the universe as a whole, it would appear that the laws of physics do not depend on whether or not something is happening in our solar system. The color red will always be the same color, and gravity will always be the same force. This suggests that the universe is deterministic, meaning that everything that happens is a direct result of everything that has happened previously. This concept is further expanded upon by the theory of general relativity, which tells us that time and space intertwined together form a four-dimensional continuum. According to this theory, time is not a river that flows from past to future, but instead it's more like a block in which all moments in time coexist. In other words, the past, present, and future all exist simultaneously, and we can travel between them at any time. Now, I know that sounds pretty wild, but hear me out. It makes a lot more sense when you consider the fact that the speed of light is constant regardless of the observer's frame of reference. This means that no matter where you are in the universe, time would always pass at the exact same rate. However, that doesn't really explain why we don't remember anything about our future or past. Well, this is because the human brain has the ability to perceive only one moment in time at a time. The reason why we think we're able to perceive multiple moments in time is simply because our memories are triggered by external stimuli, which brings us back to those people who claim to have experienced lost time. These people may have experienced a sudden change in their brain activity, which caused them to miss out on entire chunks of time. In other words, their brains simply skipped over certain moments in time. But what about those people who have experienced time slips? Well, these people may have subconsciously jumped to different moments in time, but when they tried to return back to their original moment in time, they found themselves unable to do so. Why? Well, this is because according to the block universe theory, once a moment in time has passed, it cannot be reversed. This means that whenever someone experiences a time slip, they're actually experiencing something in the past or future, but because they're not mentally prepared for it, they interpret what they're seeing as something strange or unfamiliar, and therefore they become confused or disoriented. To make matters worse, it's highly unlikely that anyone would ever believe someone else who claims to have traveled through time, and therefore they wouldn't tell anyone about it. This could explain why roughly 2 or 3 of all people who have experienced time slips are men. Men are generally less likely to talk about their personal experiences and feelings, and therefore they're less likely to report these time slips. And now you might be asking yourself, well, why don't scientists just admit that time travel is real? Well, the main reason for this is because there's no evidence to suggest that time travel is real. Most of the examples given by these people can be explained away by other things such as dementia, sleepwalking, or having a vivid imagination. Furthermore, even if we were to accept that these people are telling the truth, it wouldn't necessarily mean that time travel is real. They could have simply stumbled upon a parallel universe in which time works differently, but that doesn't really make any more sense. Think about it. If we were to accept that these people are telling the truth, it would mean that there are infinite universes out there with infinite versions of ourselves in them. But if this is true, why haven't we seen any evidence of this? If there are infinite parallel universes out there, shouldn't we have seen some kind of anomaly by now? Or maybe there aren't any anomalies because all of these parallel universes are perfectly normal and we're the ones who are crazy. The point is that we currently don't have enough evidence to prove or disprove the existence of time travel or parallel universes. And therefore, it's impossible to say for sure whether or not these people are telling the truth. However, even if we were to assume that these people are lying, it still wouldn't change the fact that our perception of time is highly unreliable. In fact, our perception of time is so unreliable that we can't even agree on what time it is. If you were to ask 100 random people what time it is, you would get 100 different answers. And this is because each person's internal clock is slightly different. This means that there is no objective way to measure time. Time is entirely subjective and relative to the observer. So what does this mean for the nature of reality? If time is not real, then what is? Well, according to the best theories that we currently have, the only thing that is real is change. Everything else, including space, matter, and energy, are simply different states of this underlying reality. In other words, the universe is nothing more than a constantly changing energy field. If this is true, then it would mean that we only ever experience one moment in time. The past and future are nothing more than figments of our imagination. This might sound depressing at first, but in reality it's actually quite liberating. It means that we're not bound to the limitations of our physical bodies. We can do whatever we want, whenever we want. The only limitation is our own imagination. Now, obviously, this is a very complex topic, and there are many different ways to look at it. But hopefully this video has given you a new perspective on the nature of time. Thanks for watching.